Well, that was a great roundup of day one. And to kick off day two, I'm really pleased to invite Anni Hood to open. Anni is the creator and founder of the Well Intelligence Holdings portfolio. The portfolio includes 3 platforms that have developed organically over the last 10 years and now operate together as an agile powerhouse of business insight under the brand of Well Intelligence. Well Intelligence is a research, insights, strategy, and education hub delivering market evidence analysis and solution models that makes the case for wellbeing investment in business, society, and for individuals. Bespoke and tailored products and services include the Impetus Hub, Masterclass Series, Corporate Core, and Walk the Talk. I've actually had the privilege of being one of the founding members of the Impetus Hub, of which has been a great opportunity to help continue to build a global network of like-minded individuals. Anni's insights and open discussions through this platform has and continues to be right on the pulse, whilst also providing a community to support both professional and personal growth. I would now like to hand over the floor, while screen, over to Anni.
Thanks so much, Erin, and good morning, afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world, wherever you're listening in. Thank you to Erin and the WHA for inviting me to keynote on day 2. It's an absolute privilege to be here. What I'm going to talk about today and focus on are the insights to accelerate wellbeing culture priority. Lots has happened, of course, in the last couple of years, and I really wanted to focus in on 10 key areas that I think will be helpful to keep in our minds and to also muse on in terms of business strategy cultivation for next year and insights into what's happening on the ground. One of the things I have noticed is cognitive dissonance becoming much more prevalent. Now, what is cognitive dissonance? Well, it's a social psychology theory, and it refers to mental health conflict. In other words, it is when one knows something to be true or believes in something, but chooses in another direction. So it's when behaviors and beliefs do not align, or we go against our values, and it causes tension, unease, anxiety, and people attempt to relieve those discomforts in different ways. And this is going to be a thread as we go through, because I believe that cognitive dissonance is feeding some of the habits we're developing in society. And a lot of those habits are where the wellbeing industry hold the solution to that. Some examples of some very certainly prevalent and quite prolific cognitive dissonance are these. Women supporting the Me Too movement whilst objectifying themselves on Instagram. Climate crisis campaigners who do not walk their talk. Equality activists who would think nothing of diminishing another social group whilst in pursuit of their own elevation for equality. And you know, it sounds a little strong, but it feels akin to societal gaslighting, if you will, and a culture that is breeding doubt, anxiety, and certainly a lack of trust. And is it really more important to virtue signal than it is to do what you know is to be the right thing? And there's also a huge part of the better health and well-being conversation that is that, and in fact, I was just speaking to Erin about this a moment ago, is that well-being has been widely acknowledged as a pandemic winner. But when I look at the various statistics that are today's statistics, you know, in the last few weeks or months, one could be forgiven for imagining that was simply wishful thinking. And my own sense of reality is that the needle has moved, but not quite as much as we believed it would, or indeed how it has. So On to my first in the top 10, although this is by no means in any particular order. We know that interdependence and interconnection between geopolitics, the environment, the economy, and society is more evident than it's ever been. Particularly during the last couple of years, but that was recognised way before that. But so too is the recognition that professional performance and business insight cannot be separated from personal growth. The two are absolutely going together. And so that diminishment of those vertical silos that have become much more inclusive ecosystems, and that business insight with personal growth is a real sweet spot that we've certainly seen through the lens of well intelligence and responded to through new service products there. And what used to be compartmentalized has become more integrated, and that there is, of course, a lean into that working from home, and now a hybrid mix. And that hybrid mix has really helped to promote the weave of thinking that our personal growth, connection, and well-being cannot be separated from the way we perform professionally, the culture in business. And we can see that is really stepping forward in priority in corporations. And indeed in every industry. Is it going as fast as we might like to see? No, it isn't. But we can't forget just how much pressure and how much on the plate of leaders right now must also be, I think, taken into consideration. So no more silos is number one. Number two, macro well-being trifecta. Now, well-being, as we know, means many things to many people, but for ease of following the evolution and integration of well-being, I'm seeing these core components as really encompassing to all aspects of well-being. The first is psychological safety, the second, physiological health, and the third, personal growth and connection. But what do I mean by these three areas? Well, for psychological safety, you want to be thinking emotional and mental security, a sense of belonging, having been seen and heard, and feeling that one matters. Physical safety is also important, diminishing that fear of catching COVID. And I'm not going to dwell too much on the COVID conversation. I think we're all probably had enough of it. What I would say, though, is that I think there's going to be a stronger lean into testing. There is a strong narrative on vaccines, but what is also prevalent, what I'm hearing from those who are running large buildings and corporations where there may be hundreds or thousands of people all coming together, that actually safety through testing and knowing that you're in an environment that people are not only potentially vaccinated or unvaccinated, that is, I think, less of the issue on a personal level, more that we're not in an environment where people have COVID. So being COVID free and not having that fear of catching it is part of that psychological safety. But all of these things and more play into the base layer of Maslow's hierarchy. So psychological safety is a core component of that well-being trifecta. Physiological health are all the things that can be done to keep us healthy. I'll focus a little more on this later because it's very much a part of this narrative. But three key things that I think we can all do that will make a massive difference to our physiological health is hydration, making sure we all drink an absolute, I wouldn't say a ton of water, but 2 to 3 litres of pure water a day. And that's not tea instead, it's not a cordial, it's pure water that helps us truly flush out. Sleep is the most underrated tool, we have in our toolbox, and leaning into that, getting 8 hours of sleep if we can, and those of us in the northern hemisphere, it might even be tipping into 9 or 10 hours. That happens during winter. It's cold. We hibernate, not literally, but a little bit more during this time. And the third, least popular, is sobriety. And if that's something you simply cannot contemplate, a consciousness of how much alcohol we drink. And I'm going to come on to stats relative to alcohol consumption and how that has significantly impacted the health in the UK over the last 20 months. And third is that sense of personal growth. And connection, and for that I turn to Marianne Williamson. I won't read out the quote, but I'll leave it on screen so that you can see it and relate to it. And what I've learned, and I think several others too, is that sense of getting outside our comfort zones for personal growth and connection. And in the words of Marianne Williamson, it isn't so much that we are inadequate, but rather that that fear of just how much we are capable of doing and of achieving. And I think when one thinks of those 4 dimensions of well-being, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Spiritual tends to be the one left more wanting. There are less, people, employees, leaders who can relate to spirituality in the same way that they can relate to physical well-being or emotional or mental well-being. Business and industry leaders walking the talk. This has always been important, but for now, when we are seeking as a society, a community, and an industry to promote the wellbeing conversation, leaders literally taking the lead on this is imperative. They serve an aspirational icon and spirit, and also provide something that is inspirational to their team. And in fact, one of the speakers, in fact, last week at the Preferred Conference in Boston was talking about wanting to transform himself, I won't say who, and in sharing that whole process with his team in an act of transparency and inspiration. And for anyone simply playing lip service to this, we know it just isn't going to work. And the integration of a more constructive practice for all of us right now does seem more necessary than ever. And we're talking, and this is being recorded at the end of November, and just days ago, the Omicron variant was announced, and it's hit a lot of industries, not least of all hospitality and travel, very, very badly. And the need for all of us to find our own anchors, to find some semblance of inner strength, to nourish ourselves and to stay balanced and aligned to go through to the future has become more important than ever. And there are lots of ways that all of us can shape that, but the pressure on leaders at the moment is extraordinary. And whilst there is a lot of discussion around the well-being of employees, quite rightly, I think there needs to be perhaps a little more around the well-being and resilience for leaders. And again, we're going to come on to some of this discussion. So, number 4, the marriage of well-being and technology. A phrase I heard recently and I love is technology loads the dice for success. And I think that the advent a few years ago of biohacking is something that's going to really come into its own in the next couple of years. And one of the things that I don't like so much is that phrase hacking. It sounds so alien and unpleasant in our world of well-being, and I prefer the term bio-nourish, but hacking is certainly a good way of capturing what happens, but it's not always as invasive as it sounds. Having 3 liters of water is a hack. We are hacking into our biology to improve it. And in fact, using halotherapy is a hack to our physiological health. Sleeping, the same thing. So it doesn't have to be something invasive or out of the ordinary that we need to do, but technology undoubtedly is going to lead our industry, and humanity is going to shape it. We're going to take from it what we want and need, and I think presented in that way, that umbrella, if I can say that, of biohacking shows the relevance not only to those more inclined, that are already pursuing wellness practice, to a better state of well-being. It extends it, if I may, outside of what can be labeled as a well-being bubble. So the hacks that take place, biohacking is in essence combining technology, science, our own biology and health to optimize our body's functions to work in its most optimal state. And in fact, I'll show you. I'm wearing. You can see that. Some Finnish technology called First Beat that maps data, which we'll talk about in a moment. But knowing what your data is, understanding how your body is working physiologically will help you, will give you the basis to be able to hack it, to be able to improve it, improve your biology and your body's ability to function. Number 5, diversity, equality, inclusion, and belonging. Equality is, I think, the most defining issue of our time, bar none. The value of the inclusivity and diversity conversation certainly links through to psychological safety. And one of the things I've recognized in the last year is that platform of DEIB as a cut through, if I can say that, to the well-being conversation, because it really anchors there that sense of belonging in people, that sense of being heard, seen, and feeling like one matters is fundamental to your well-being. Now, some of the there are many aspects to this, of course, and we've seen a huge raise in the profile and value of Black Lives Matter after events in the United States last year. And it was International Men's Day last week, and there was a report by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Issues Affecting Men and Boys. Now, I know that is not necessarily a societal group that you would expect to be discussed within diversity and inclusion, but what is becoming evident is the need to consider how we raise one gender without diminishing another. And anyone who follows my work will know that I share concern about how equality is being won. And I stand upon my belief that men are having a harder time on the planet. But how do we reach more parity? And let me just share with you a few stats, from the report last week. And this was discussed in Parliament and described as a cultural low point relative to men and boys. And it showed that 13% of men are not in employment or education compared to 10% of women. Suicide rates for men are 3 times higher than they are for women. Life expectancy for a man today is 4 years lower than for a woman, and 83% of rough sleepers are men. 96% of the prison population is male. Of course, I could stand at the other side and describe all the lack of parity that we have as women. But the point I'm making is that equality will be achieved through an elevation of unity for everybody. This conversation isn't going to go away, and it's fundamental to wellbeing culture in businesses, in communities, and across society. So keep an eye on that as one of those insights for cultural priority. Under cultivating spiritual strength, and I would say not just cultivating spiritual strength, but a default to love and be compassionate. What I learned over recent years is that anyone with an indifference to spiritual values can find they have a harder time in their ability to self-nurture, to self-assure. And when I say an indifference to spiritual values, I don't mean a non-belief in God. I mean recognition that there's something greater than us. And as I alluded to a moment ago, spiritual health is the least practiced element of those 4 dimensions of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And again, referring to a recent conference I attended, a quote struck with me by the general director of the new hotel, the Londoner, on the edge of Leicester Square, a wonderful, wonderful man called Charles Oak. And he was talking about our senses and discussing how COVID had affected the hospitality industry. And he said, we mustn't forget what drives us all is love. And I think remembering that and cultivating that as a default in something that it's something of a life raft in a storm that we are still enduring right now. And of course, there's been a literal storm, just over the weekend. I'm not in an area of no power, but boy, oh boy, it is certainly cold in England today. And just as a finish off on that point of cultivating spiritual strength, it isn't something that should be shied from in an environment that wouldn't be usual to talk about it. And it's why I refer to Charles. It's not something you tend to hear on the stage, on a hospitality stage, and it stood out because it was so unusual to bring it up. And of course, we want to see more of that. We want to see more of that openness to integrate emotional and spiritual values and recognition in the whole narrative as we embrace the future and adjust to new cultures. Knowing your own data is something that I think has become an imperative tool to be able to really map what we're doing and how we're doing it. One thing is for sure, everyone, and I really do mean everyone, thinks they're healthier than they actually are. So knowing the basics knowing exactly where you stand, whether you're getting recovery during sleep, whether you're able to experience recovery moments during your day, is absolutely essential for moving the needle. So you can do all the hacks you want, but you want to know that it's making a difference. So whether you're wearing a Apple Watch or some sort of Fitbit tracker, or using, as I showed you, that more clinical grade technology, that is going to give you an irrevocable reality check on how you're doing. And I would encourage not just you as individuals, but in your companies. If you've got, a cast of hundreds or even thousands, having that and being able to demonstrate, prove, and as a source of motivation for your team is vital. In fact, one of the things that I talked about recently is a scenario for companies. What if you could say, working here will make you healthier? Now, you'd have to measure that. Well, why not? Why not give all of your employees a piece of, whether it's First Beat technology, which, and I am plugging First Beat, I realise. The reason I love it so much is because the analysis you get is so beautifully illustrated, easy to understand, and specific to three key things. And those three key things are sleep, exercise, and recovery from stress, or absolutely lightning rod important for the workplace and our everyday health. Point 8, I could talk about that forever, but I won't. Beware of normalizing stress and uncertainty. And I see that everywhere, that we've all endured so much over the past, God, it's getting on for a couple of years, isn't it? It must be 21, 22 months now. The perfect storm that's COVID-19, the climate crisis, social inequalities, and mental health have brought human and planetary health into sharp focus, but at the same time, that cognitive dissonance that I referred to earlier is rampant. And I do it myself because there is literally so much going on. Many people have adjusted to a normal high level of stress. That means greater inflammation in the body and even greater need to allow recovery that isn't, please, at the bottom of a bottle of gin or wine. And just to really underline that point, recent research and a pulling together of statistics, have shown this. According to Public Health England, in 2020, there was a 20% increase in total alcoholic specific deaths compared to 2019, 20%. The report also saw significantly higher rates from May 2020 onwards. That 33% of deaths occurred in the most deprived group. Now, deaths from mental and behavioural disorders due to alcohol increased by 10.8%. But here's the real kicker. Deaths from alcoholic poisoning increased by 15.4%. That was compared to a decrease of 4.5% between 2018 and 2019. So overall, that's an increase of 20% on alcohol poisoning in 2020. Those are big numbers. And when I talk about the normalizing, beware of how easily normalizing stress and uncertainty can be. We all do it. We all tell ourselves, oh, look, I am just going to have a cheeky little double gin and tonic, because who would have a single, right? And before you know it, you might have consumed 4, 5, 6 units. It's going to affect your quality of sleep. It's going to affect how able you are to cope with anything that comes left field. We're talking the next morning now, where you can feel more paranoid. If you're prone to anxiety, you're probably going to feel even more anxious. Those stats speak for themselves. They are significant. They're not the only thing. Overeating, putting on weight, and just finding healthy ways that are not necessarily, or not at all, binging on Netflix, but taking some time to walk, a bracing walk in the cold, a bit of meditation, perhaps reading, being out in nature, is a huge win, of course. And widening your window of tolerance. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I go back to my dear friend here, First Beat. Managing stress and recovery is critical for leaders, for employees, for us in our everyday lives. And what that means is managing our window of tolerance between our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous systems. So what we have, if we're healthy, is quite a large window of tolerance that we usually operate within. Fight or flight is your sympathetic being activated, and rest and digest is that relaxed state where your parasympathetic has kicked in. And what you want to be doing is being able to keep that window nice and wide. Those that are feeling stressed, have mental health difficulties, tend to have a much narrower window of tolerance. And of course, to be able to cultivate that to a wider state, that's about wellness practice. So it is about, back to that macro wellbeing trifecta, your psychological safety, your physiological health, and that personal connection and growth. Those are three key things that can keep that window of tolerance nice and wide. And proactive measures to protect mental and emotional health. Now, we all know instinctively that mental health has taken a bashing, over the last couple of years, but it wasn't until October, yes, it is last month, that we first saw the evidence of what the impact of the last couple of years has been. And that, for anyone who hasn't read it, that catalogued a 29% rise in referrals for suspected episodes of psychosis between April 2019 and April 2021 in the UK, that is. Globally, it has shown 76 million extra cases of anxiety and depression, and 53 million extra cases of major depressive disorders over the same period, and that's globally, obviously not just in the UK. So it confirms what was already an instinctive anecdotal belief, and really responding to the mental health needs of all population does mean a reevaluation of what already exists. And that's not only in healthcare systems, but it's in the workplace, it's in communities, it's across society. And we know that mental health first aiders have been quite a dramatic push in businesses over recent years, and that's really fantastic. But what I would say strongly is that the cultural shift has to be top down and bottom up. And there are burgeoning, I think, examples of companies that are truly embracing this as a culture. And I think the B Corp companies, and I'm thinking of Exclusive Collection here in the UK from a hospitality perspective, because they're the first hospitality group to get B Corp accreditation here. There are many examples. Do go on to that website, and that is fundamentally relative to the climate crisis. However, there is a real hand in glove appreciation of the climate crisis and human well-being. The two go together. You can't really separate them. So as a top 10, and I didn't do a slide. that captured it. But let me just run through that top 10 again for you. No more silos was number 1. Secondly, macro wellbeing trifecta. What are those things? Psychological safety, physiological health, personal growth, and connection. And I shared that lovely quote with you from Marianne Williamson. Number 3, business and industry leaders really walking their talk. It's not enough to play lip service. Those of you who are leading teams, leading a company, really step into that programming for yourself. Cultivate your own little program, or get some help. In fact, I'm about to step into my own 2-month program from Wednesday. That's a whole other story. Delighted to tell it, any of you, anytime you like. Number 4, the marriage of well-being and technology. It's not going to go away. In fact, we need it. We need and you know, what was that phrase that I love? Technology loads the dice for success. Another phrase that, in fact, I coined a few years ago was that the future of well-being will be driven by technology, but defined by humanity. Number 5, equality, the most defining issue of our time, bar none. And belonging, the B in that acronym, I think is perhaps the most valuable. That sense of belonging, that sense of emotional security and psychological safety is vital for well-being. Cultivating spiritual strength, as I said, perhaps the least embraced of the dimensions of well-being, and that can be done in many ways, but all of them involve usually stepping outside of our comfort zone. Know your own data, whether it's through a wearable or something, you know, that's more micro analytical, like the First Beat technology that I shared with you. It will help you improve your well-being, the well-being of your team, and in fact the performance of you in business too. Beware of normalizing stress and uncertainty. We all do it, no matter how versed we are in the well-being narrative, and it's incredibly important to put on your own oxygen mask on this and know where your fragility is, if you will. And you know, the top 3 that I gave you, hydration, sleep, and sobriety. I know, not popular, but my God, it will make such a difference to you. You'll sleep better, you'll feel better, you'll have more clarity. It's wonderful. Number 9, widen your window of tolerance. I talked about that window between parasympathetic and sympathetic, and doing what you can to have more green moments. I say green moments because that's that sort of First Beat narrative that we talk about. How do you create a green moment? You breathe for a few minutes, you get in a halotherapy chamber, you meditate, you go for a walk in nature, you don't take your phone with you. And proactive measures to protect mental and emotional health. And those measures mirror in part what I said, or what I've just said previously, but also just that intentionality of valuing the quality of your stillness and your recovery moments during the day as much as you value making it to those deadlines. Erin, I don't know whether you want to pose any questions, or whether we finish up in a different way. Please tell me how you'd like to close.
Well, firstly, I just want to say, wow, you've just sparked so many thoughts and provoked so many kind of ideas, as you always do when listening to you. And I'm sure many others today watching will also feel the same way. I really love how we've had 2 very, very different keynote speakers yesterday and today, and both seem to have married together amazingly, and there's a real theme coming through, you know, especially with like putting on your oxygen mask, love and hope, and And this is really why I felt very strongly about trying to integrate the halotherapy industry with the wellbeing and wellness industries. And I truly believe that halotherapy has a really important part to play in this overall jigsaw puzzle of well-being. And whilst we may be this teeny tiny little piece, it's really important that all the pieces work together. And I think that, you know, together we really can make a difference. And so much of what you have said makes so much sense. And as you say, we've got to work from the top down and the bottom up, and it will all come together. So thank you so much, Annie, for gifting us your time and knowledge and insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
And anyone who would like to find out more about some of Annie's Impetus Hub and Well Intelligence, the details are there behind Annie. But if you wanted to say a few words about those, please do.
Oh, thank you, Erin. Well, some of the products that have been created this year have been in direct response to what we have seen in the business world. Impetus Hub has been created to combine business intelligence with personal growth and connection. It is a snap at £99 a year. That's a monthly insights page. It's 90 minutes a month discussion, and it's a backup on shared articles and conversation in a WhatsApp group. And I know Erin very, very kindly referred to it when she introduced me. Very grateful for that, Erin. Thank you. We run a masterclass series. Full disclosure, I partner with First Beat, these guys, in Walk the Talk, where we work with leaders in businesses, and again, it combines business insight and intelligence with personal growth. So they wear the technology for several days before we meet. We meet outside, we go for a walk, and we discuss the results of their data and well-being, cultural integration within their businesses. Well Intelligence runs masterclasses, and we offer bespoke corporate services as well. And I must say that the cut through to well-being has become much more defined, I think, you know, in the last couple of years. And we know that food, exercise, sleep, happiness, all incredibly, incredibly important. But the cut-throughs and the recognition have evolved in a less obvious way, in my humble opinion. One of them I mentioned, the diversity and inclusion narrative and conversation, that has become an absolute cornerstone to well-being, and in particular that sense of belonging. ESG, environment, society, governance, is another cut through, and the well-being trifecta that I shared is another perspective, I suppose, that I'm seeing resonate more easily with business leaders and any leaders, actually, not only business, but, you know, we're all leaders, whether we're a parent or you know, whatever we're doing in life. And look, it's coming towards the end of the year, and I think it's time for all of us, or gives time to all of us for a bit of reflection. And boy, you know, there's a lot to reflect on, but I would encourage all of you to not miss out in that reflection, taking care of one's own well-being now, and how we take better care of it as we look forward into 2022. Thank you, Erin, so very much.
Thank you, Annie.